There's a type of zipper that you'll see in a lot of patterns. You'll see it sneaked in there and it's an invisible zipper. Today's all about that. I'm going to show you how to sew it, how to get the neatest result, my favorite way of doing it. Very practical. Stay with me. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing. I'm coming to you today from my parents' backyard in the south of Chile. It's extremely cold. I was not expecting this type of cold weather in the middle of summer. But oh well, I've got a little scarf here and let's get into it. Now there is a type of zipper that you'll see here and there in some patterns. You'll usually find this on a hip seam or a type of skirt or pant, usually the more formal type. It's a type of zipper that if sewn correctly you won't see. It'll just look like a regular seam. You might just see the little pull there. Other places that you'll commonly see this is in the back of a sheath dress. Mainly this is used with woven fabrics. I wouldn't really be too happy about putting an invisible zipper with a knit fabric, because then you could probably just stretch the fabric and wiggle yourself into the garment. So I'm going to show you my preferred way of doing an invisible zipper. There are lots of ways to do it. You will find different types of tutorials that do it in different ways. The end result is going to be the same. We really want a seamless look between the seam of the zipper and the seam that goes beyond it, below it. We don't want any bubble, pucker or anything strange going on there. So the way I do it is going to achieve that. I know some people swear by putting invisible zippers with a regular presser foot or even with a regular zipper presser foot. I'm not one of those people. I need my specific presser foot. Very easy to find. Most machines come with it. It's a presser foot that helps you put the invisible zipper, and it's got little ridges inside that go right into the teeth. So I find it really helpful. At least that's the way I get the best results. Every time I've tried other methods, I haven't gotten such neat results as I do with the invisible zipper presser foot. So I highly recommend it. Presser feet, they're not expensive, and if they're going to help you get a neat result, I think they're worth purchasing if it doesn't come with your sewing machine. I'm going to show you this invisible zipper sewn on a side seam of a skirt. This is, spoiler alert, this is a pattern that's going to be released very soon from Love Notion's called Encore skirt. I'll show you some line out here. There are lots and lots of versions within the same pattern. The construction is sort of the same with them, but they have different shapes, so you get different looks with the same pattern. And then we have the invisible zipper. So let's see in detail, step by step. You'll be seeing it on pink linen fabric. I've tried to make all the marks really visible, really up close footage so you can really see what's going on. And then if you've never done one, practice. The more you practice, the better you'll get at it. And then it'll just be another zipper technique that you'll master. I'll just show you this part of the garment. This is where the zipper is being inserted. It's really invisible. It's right in there in the seam. You can't see the zipper tape. You can just see the pull. The zipper goes only up to here, so you can see that the seam is really continuous. There's no puckers. There's nothing that will let you know that there's a zipper in there. And on the inside, it looks like this. So it's really, really neat. I want you to achieve this. There are a few steps to get there. Not hard. Let's see. There are many ways to sew an invisible zipper. I'm just going to show you the way I prefer to do it on the rare occasion that I do sew one. I prefer this regular type of zipper that you sew in with a centered zipper insertion. I would do that as my preferred way. But sometimes invisible zippers in a pattern, in this case it's a pattern test. One thing that I would do for any type of zipper, it's a centered zipper or a zipper fly technique, any type of zipper, I would always interface the area. In this case, I've interfaced about 3/4 of an inch there on the hip area where the zipper is going to be. In the way I'm going to sew it, I'm going to include the rest of the seam that I have here. This is in the hip area, but then afterwards, after the invisible zipper's in, we're going to have a regular seam. I have marked with yellow where my invisible zipper is going to start. That's the line right there. This is the length of my zipper. I find the technique easier if you have an excess of zipper here, a little over an inch. You can see the pull is going to reach that seam. In this case, the zipper is going to include the waistband partially. So this pull is going to reach up to there where the seam is of the waistband. And then I've made my mark here, which is not exactly at the end of the zipper right there. It's easier if you have an excess right there to do the technique. So I'm just going to take this away for a second. What I'm going to do is sew my regular seam on the side seam, regular stitch length, 1/2 inch seam allowance. At this point where I have the mark, I'm going to reinforce, and from here onwards I'm going to sew with a longer stitch length. It will be a basting stitch that will be removed later. Here is my mark. This is where I'm going to reinforce. Now I'm going to lengthen my stitch length to sew the rest. I'm going to sew this all the way up to the top so that I can press it open and have a memory crease for the whole section of the waistband. For other styles, you might find that the invisible zipper is only going to reach up to the waist area and then the waistband is going to be separate from it. In essence, the technique of the invisible zipper is not going to change, it's going to be the same. The only difference in this case is that we're going to have a seam going across the invisible zipper, which is going to be the waistband seam. But you can sew this on a regular seam without a waistband. You can just have the zipper pull reach up to here and then you have a little bit of zipper tape and then sew your waistband on top. Whichever way you want to do it, the technique of the zipper is going to be the same. What's important, because this one has a waistband, is that these seams match right there. So now that I've done all this, I'm going to go ahead and press the seam open, get a nice little memory crease, and then we'll continue with the technique. This is the seam pressed open, including all the waistband. Now over here, I can see where the change of stitch length happened. I'm going to poke a pin right there where I reinforced. So from this stitch upwards, it's going to be a basting stitch. So my pin is going to go right in there. It's going to come out through to the right side of the skirt right here, and I'm going to make a mark. This is just going to help me remove the basting stitch later and know that from here up I can start pulling the stitches out. This is my invisible zipper. It's the closest color I could find. This is the right side of an invisible zipper. It's the one where you can't see any zipper teeth. This side where you can see the teeth, that's the wrong side of the zipper. You need to put this smooth right side of the zipper touching the seam right here. Now the pull is going to be slightly underneath the seam of the waistband right there. I'm going to baste the zipper teeth to the seam allowance on both sides right here. I'm just going to put a few pins first, but then I'm actually going to get a needle and thread and baste this down, hold it in place right there at the seam allowance. I'm hand basting this zipper only to the seam allowance. So just the one layer here. I know some people like to sew this zipper teeth to the seam allowance on the machine. If you have any ready-to-wear garment with an invisible zipper, go ahead and look inside and you probably see that this basting is done by machine. I would just rather hand baste it. It will achieve the same purpose. I do want to keep this in place. I don't want to just sew the zipper without basting it in place first. What we're going to do now is look at this from the right side of the seam. I have my little mark and I know that if I poke my seam ripper in here to find the stitch, this is already a basting stitch right there. From here down, it's reinforced. So now all I have to do is open this up and we'll be able to sew in the invisible zipper. We have a memory crease from having pressed the seam open, and I'm going to open it all the way up. Okay, so that's how it looks like. It looks a little bit messy. We need to get the zipper pull out of the way. So I'm going to open up the zipper. I've pushed this down about an inch before that seam starts, and I'm going to just poke the pull through there. Now from the other side, from the wrong side, I've released a little bit of that hand basting around this area. Our seam starts higher than this lower edge of the zipper, so it doesn't matter if I release this. I just want to have access through here to get that pull and just push it all the way down. So I've got a pair of pliers. Here I can see that pull. So I'm just going to grab it with this and push it down out of the way. I find it's the easiest way to do it. Now I'm going to pull these basting stitches tighter and just get that tension that I had before releasing the stitches a little. So the pull's out of the way. You can see the seam is up higher. So when we sew the zipper, all of this business is going to be out of the way. That's why I wanted my seam to finish up higher than this area. I would never want the seam to go lower and closer to this area, or else it would just get in the way. What we need to do on each side now is extend this. We have the zipper separated, and on each side we want to fold all these teeth this way so that we have full access, because we want to be sewing close to there, which will end up being in the seam. This sort of folds onto itself. The regular presser foot is not going to help me. Some people can sew invisible zippers with a regular zipper presser foot. I use an actual invisible zipper presser foot which has these ridges down there, so I find it really helpful. For me, it doesn't really matter which side you sew first. They're still going to get sewn, so just pick a side. You can see we have a ridge on this side and on this side. I want to use this one, and this is where the zipper teeth are going to go into while you're keeping it extended like this. this is how it wants to be. This is what you need to do with your fingers to make it flat so that you can get in and sew right in there. The teeth are going to be inside that little ridge, and we're going to start just below the seam of the waistband. You can back tuck and use a regular stitch length. I can see where the seam starts, so I'm going to put a pin so that I know that's where I'm attempting to sew to. So that's one side sewn. This is the side I've sewn. Maybe you can see my pink stitching. I can see it with my eyes, but it's right there. And then it's going to end up right on the seam here. That's where the seam starts. That's where this seam ended. So it's going to be in the same place. And now it's the other side. So this one is the other side. So I'm going to sew with the other ridge that's on the other side. I want to sew both of them from the top of the waist down in the same direction. So I'm going to put the teeth on this ridge over here. And always with my fingers, I'm trying to keep this extended. This is why it's so important to do the hand basting so that the zipper teeth doesn't move. It's still in the same place. All I'm playing with is extending this, but it's not moving out of place. Here I can also see where the seam is, so I'm going to put a little pin right there just so I know. If you look under here, you're going to see the initial seam of the skirt and then the seam of the invisible zipper are in the same place. And that is the case for both sides there. There's a little bit of a mess, you know, reinforced seams because we didn't reinforce there when we sewed the invisible zipper. It's the same on that initial seam. We went up there, reinforced, and then did the basting stitch. So it's not going to look super pretty in there, but it's going to be continuous and it achieves the purpose. So this pull that was tucked in there, I'm going to bring it back up here so I can pull up the zipper again. Now from this side I have my pull. And I can just zip it up and you can see the zipper is totally invisible. It's just not seen. It's like it's not there. In this area, you can see the seams match of the waistband. Hand basting, the tape really helps because it helps the zipper stay right there and not move anywhere. And then as you go up, it's a little bit bulky. Okay, I had to push up with a bit of strength to get it all the way up there. It gets a little bulky at the seam. Totally invisible. It just looks like a regular side seam. The seam here that united the zipper is continuous to this seam over here, so that's the point. You don't want a bubble or a pucker, nothing like that. I'm gonna remove the basting stitches. I don't really need them there now that the zipper's in. You can see in this case that we still have to finish the end of the waistband. When this waistband is folded in towards the inside like this, then the pull is going to come out right from the top like that. Okay, I've separated the zipper again a little bit so we can have access here. Extending this, the excess of the tape right here, I'm going to fold it behind, sort of diagonally out of the way right there. I want this excess tape out of the way, so I'm folding it out of the way as much as I can. And I'm just going to give it one little hand tuck here that I can remove later. I don't want to have a pin in there. I think that's bulky, but I do want this out of the way. On this other side, the same. I'm going to extend this and just fold this tape out of the way and just tuck it in place. Now that the tape is out of the way, we can bring the waistband forward onto itself, right sides together, keeping this fold that we'd already done like this, and this is going to reach that waistband seam right there. And now what we need to do is sew from here down. I'm going to use the same invisible presser foot I had used before. It's such a short little area here. From beneath I can feel the teeth, so I'm going to slide this all in, get that teeth under the ridge right there, do the same thing I was doing before. I'm just doing it again now with this waistband on top. I've sewn that seam. You can see, you can feel the teeth. It was the same thing, just putting the ridge in there, the same as I did over here. And now when I flip this, it's going to be enclosed. So now I'm going to do the same with this other side over here. Bring this forward, keep this forward as it was. Make sure it reaches the waistband seam over here. I can feel the teeth. It's like I could see them. I can see the outline of them. I'm going to start there. The teeth are on this ridge here. Now that we have this edge neat and everything finished, we can just pull the zipper up, and that's how that finishes right there. Super neat. Now we still have to finish the waistband. That's super easy. We just need to neaten this all up and finish top stitching and fixing that in place. But that is in essence how you sew an invisible zipper. I've had bad experiences with invisible zippers in the past, not lasting very long, getting stuck in the seams, just breaking on me and then having to remove them and replace them. And yeah, those are the reasons why it's not my favorite way. But I do have to admit that they look really neat if sewn properly. If they don't turn out really invisible, then I don't like them, and I would just repeat the technique until I get it to look invisible. Give this a go. Even though I say it's not my favorite type of zipper, don't take my word for it. We all come to these conclusions after experience and having, you know, lived in these zippers. So I have my opinion based on my own experiences. It might not be yours. You might end up absolutely loving these types of zippers. This is a sewing channel. I do want general content here, and I'm so happy I have the invisible zipper tutorial here for you as a resource. Whether I like them or not, here you can see how I do them. I can sew them in pretty well. I get a really good result. I just don't do them very often because they're not my favorite. I did film it for you. It is part of a pattern that's coming. So out of all the skirts I made, I had to have one at least that had the proper technique as per the pattern.
Remember, if you're sewing a longer invisible zipper on a back center seam, it'll be the same technique. It's all the same.
It's the same way I do it in wherever place I was putting in an invisible zipper. So I hope this is helpful. Stay tuned because you'll see the pattern that has this zipper really soon. New pattern from Love Notions, really cute, lots of options, really good value. So I'll see you then when I share my finished results. I have a few skirts to share, different styles, and that's it from me. See you soon. Bye.